What's most surprising to people is that how valuable it is just to stop and write down what matters to you. Because everybody thinks they know, and then you ask them and they can't tell you. If you can't write down the things that are important to you, you probably don't know what they are.
That's Daniel Burka, and that question, do you actually know what matters to you, is what this whole episode hangs on. Welcome to In Practice. I'm Tom Pryor, Program Director at DMBA and your host. Every episode we share one practical thing for those of us working in design and tech, brought to you by the person who came up with it and explained properly enough that you can put it into practice tomorrow. That's how we teach at DMBA, and that's how this show works too. Today's episode is about choosing your next role, at a moment when choosing has rarely been harder. And as Daniel puts it, most of us don't really choose at all. We take what's in front of us out of scarcity, gut feel, and if we're honest, a bit of ego. His answer is, of all things, a spreadsheet. Wait, come back. Because the spreadsheet isn't really the tool, it's a forcing function. Writing down what truly matters to you and ranking it, this is where the real thinking starts. And the spreadsheet just makes you finally do it. And he has stress tested it on a career with more chapters than most. Daniel was creative director at Digg in its heyday, then joined a little gaming startup called Glitch, which famously went on to become Slack. He built his own company and sold it to Google, where he then spent 5 years at Google Ventures working with startups every week, then left it all for 8 years in global public health. These days, he founded and runs Hard Problems, a non-profit helping designers and people in tech find work that truly matters. More crossroads than most of us get in a lifetime, and every time the stakes got high, he reached for the same spreadsheet, and he calls it job rank. In this episode, Daniel walks us through exactly how it works, and it's free to copy the second we're done. There's a link in the description. Let's get into it. Daniel, welcome to In Practice. Wonderful to have you here. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you with us. We love doing stuff with you. So yeah, look, let's just get into it. Let's start with what we're going to share today, a tool called Job Rank. Super excited to learn about this tool, where it originated from, and how designers, tech, anyone can benefit from this thinking. So yeah, what's happened in your career when you first needed something like this? What was the origin of you realizing I need something to kind of help me understand where I need to go next with job choices?
In my career, I've had several long stints. The first job I ever had was at a design agency, and I was there for 7 years before I left and moved to Silicon Valley. That was a big decision in my life, and it felt very consequential. I needed to move. I was going to a new country, and a very big pivot in my life. And then I spent 5 years at a big startup called Digg, and then I was like trying to think, what do I want now? I'm older, I'm more experienced, I'm not happy in my current role, but what would make me happy? And so that was another big jump, and I ended up at a gaming company that weirdly later became Slack. Later on, I was at Google. I'd sold a company to Google, and I was debating whether or not to take one job or another job within Google. That felt consequential. I could either go on a big manager track and manage lots and lots of people, or I could go to a different role, and I ended up becoming a design partner at Google Ventures. So at these points in my career, I wanted to make a good, rational decision based on what was important to me at the time. And of course, in our lives, what is important to us changes over time, right? Now that I've got a kid, my life is different. When I was in my 20s, my life was different. And so it's really useful to, once in a while, really stop and think hard about what do you want, and then use that foundation for choosing what your next role is.
Well, Job Rank is the tool that's helped you understand where to go next in your career. So let's jump into it. It's a spreadsheet. Don't let that put you off, people. This is really useful stuff. Let's share your screen and look at how it works. And we're going to kind of step through step by step and see how Job Rank works.
Like you said, it's not exciting. It's just a spreadsheet, but spreadsheets are really powerful and really useful. The most important part of the framework is in the top left. So you can see there's a group of my important values. And what you see there are things that Daniel Burka is passionate about and that are strong values in my world. So things like making a positive impact in the world or my passion for a problem. Making money is still somewhat important, and so that's up there too. Things like career growth and learning new skills. So in my experience, I've mentored quite a few designers, and when they're at a career transition point, many people come to me and they're like, well, should I go to Facebook or should I go to Microsoft? It's really hard to give them much help. What it really boils down to is what's important to you. Doing some sort of diary exercise or sitting in a cafe and really being pensive and thinking about your life and what's important is really important at times like this. You might feel under a lot of time pressure because for many people, there's a lot of financial pressure to find a new job. But try to carve out a few days where you can stop and think what's important to you right now. It's going to be some high-level things like making positive impact in the world, or it's practical things like how long is my commute to work? How much money am I going to make? Who am I going to specifically work with? Is that somebody I respect and who I can learn from? So this section in the gray, you customize to yourself. There are some other criteria I put at the bottom here that might jog your memory. But if something really specific is important to you, like they have ping pong tables at work, put that in there too. The next thing you do is you weight those things. So all this is a weighted scoring exercise. I'm not pretending this is rocket science. But if you take each value and you score it out of 5, and you say, well, for me, positive impact in the world is important, but it's only a 2. My passion for the problem is really important. I'm going to give that a 5. I really want to make a high salary. That's a 5 too. Maybe I want to travel to cool places. I'm going to make that a 5. So you score each of the things that are your most important values. And now you've got a basis for a framework.
How did you come up with your shortlist, Daniel? Was this stuff that came to you easily, or did you have to do that kind of exercise where you were like very intentional about this list?
So I was very intentional. They did not come easily to me. Because when you're leaving a job, at least in my experience, the times I've left a job, I was stressed out. The main reason I was leaving is because I wasn't happy in my current role, and I needed time to recharge. A part of the recharge period was going to cafes, reading books, thinking hard, talking to my friends and mentors, people I really respected, and trying to write down a list like this of what's important to me. I found that to be extremely valuable. They're not horribly philosophical. They're quite practical. But taking that time to reflect and think, like the last time I switched jobs, I even went on a camping trip solo for 3 nights and spent time in the tent just thinking about these issues.
And so these ended up being the important ones for you. We'll dive a bit more, I'm sure, into the ranking side of things. So these are things you knew that were going to be important. How difficult is it then to actually weight something as a 2 or a 1 versus a 5? Because I can appreciate that if I thought about the things that really matter to me, I'd be like, well, they all kind of matter. They're all kind of a 5. So yeah, how do you mentally go, okay, these things are important, but actually this is way less important than this one? How do you resist putting a 4 or a 5 against everything?
I guess it's like any other strategic decision. If everything's important, then nothing's important. So I guess for me, it was really thinking, what are the 3 or 4 things that I most want to optimize for? In my last move, it was clear that positive impact in the world was a 5, salary was a 1. I'm in a very fortunate financial position not to optimize for salary. So there's no rules built into this spreadsheet. It's not going to force you to only pick 3 things with a 5. But if you want the scores to be deeply meaningful, I think it really behooves you to spend the time and try to come up with some sort of bell curve so not all of your items are at the top.
Nice.
And I know that's not great advice.
I can imagine if I was doing this, I would probably have a list like this and I'd be like, they all feel like 5s. So then it's almost a forcing function to go, but some must be more important than others, and then do a bit of readjustment. I can see myself having to probably first off, everything feels quite high, and then go, okay, actually it's forcing me to think a little more deeply now. Not get into statistical modeling, the bell curve is ideal, but to go, okay, some of these need to pull down if push came to shove, and maybe do that kind of exercise with yourself.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I interrupted you. We're talking about the weighting, and these things are important, but then you did go through and have your weighting.
So that's the main thing. Now you set the foundation. You know your values. You know what weight they each are. And then the key is to take every possible role that you're considering and try to score it. Obviously, some of these scores are going to be super swagged. You're just going to kind of make up numbers, but based on as much data as you got and as much as you can infer from a job listing or from a job interview, it can be valuable. I would start using this right from the beginning. Looking at job posts on LinkedIn, for instance, I would start saying, wow, I was excited about this one. If I had to guess, it would score, say, the first example here is Facebook Marketplace. Oh, I was talking to somebody at Facebook, they mentioned a role, seems really exciting. I would go in here and score it. At the beginning, you're casting quite a wide net. I put all of those roles in here and try your best to score them. And that really helps you level set, because what I found, I mentor quite a few designers, and I found many of them gravitate immediately to the first few opportunities that are presented to them. They'll hear from a friend at a startup and be like, wow, I've heard of a great job over at Microsoft's AI team. I should probably take that, right? And you're like, well, how is it compared to other roles? And they haven't done the basic work of comparing jobs and using a framework like this to compare the jobs. So I would do it from the beginning. Start testing a whole bunch of jobs that you're considering, and even consider testing jobs that don't exist yet. I know that sounds weird, but if you were like, listen, if a charity that I respect, like let's say WHO, the World Health Organization, had a role specific to me, how would that score? Because that might be my dream job. Then at least you could approach WHO and see if there is an opportunity that isn't listed yet, or start looking for jobs that look more like that, if that's what scores highly on your target. And that really gives you a broad view of what types of jobs you really should be looking for. The scoring becomes more valuable the further down the funnel you get towards actually taking a job. So as you get narrower and you're considering 2 opportunities or 3 opportunities, that's when you get in and start more fine-grained scoring. So you're in the job interview process, start asking questions of the interviewer that help you to score each of these things. In the good job interview processes, there's a space for employees to really ask questions to the employer. And I would use this framework as an opportunity to think about what's most important to you that you should be asking about.
So I'm clear. Where I've got Facebook, Eli Lilly, etc. on here, the number that I'm putting on there isn't the weighting anymore. It's the ranking that I think.
That's right.
So positive impact matters for me, but I'm not likely to get that with Facebook Marketplace. But with our future health, it's much higher. You're kind of doing that comparison. I love that thing about the future job listings, give you something to compare against as like your ideal or potential ideal.
That advice is particularly for very senior people. I think one thing even some very senior people sleep on is that it's possible in some instances to make your own job.
Right.
Obviously, that's not available to everyone, but for the people that it is, I work at a global health not-for-profit for the last 8 years called Resolve to Save Lives, working on massive global health problems like hypertension management and primary care delivery all around the world. That wasn't a job that was listed. But when the opportunity came in front of me, because I met the CEO, the former director of the Centers for Disease Control under President Obama, I scored it using these rubrics, and it scored obviously extremely high for me. And I knew that then that was a good opportunity, and I wasn't being impulsive to think that that was a good job.
So, yeah, I guess in this market at the moment, we're speaking summer 2026. A lot of people feel like it's a challenging market, but if some jobs just aren't out there, or what does that look like as far as a process to maybe approach an organization that for you is ranking really highly? How would you go about doing that?
So this is, again, I just want to be very clear before people say that, I'm being elitist. This is a fairly privileged position to be in. So people who are at the kind of director and VP level who have deep experience under their belt sometimes can pull off making their own jobs. The way this usually works, from the people I've talked to who've done it and from my own experience, is that they identify a few organizations that really score highly for them. So say for me, it might be Doctors Without Borders, so Médecins Sans Frontières. I think what they do is fantastic. I think they're highly respected and they work internationally in a way that I think is really cool. What you do is you reach out to the most senior people you can for your network. You go in and have a conversation with them about what is strategically important to their organization. So try to be helpful. So you're a senior design leader, maybe you go in and start talking about overall strategy and how design can potentially positively impact their strategy. That's usually how you kind of wedge your foot in the door, almost becoming like a technical advisor to the organization as a volunteer. I've certainly done that with some organizations. And once you wedge your foot in the door, you start exploring where design can have more impact with the organization until somebody at a senior level looks at you and is like, well, that sounds like a great role. Who would do it? And you put up your hand and say, listen, I will write the job description and help you scope this out. And if it turns out to be me, let's do a proper hiring process and maybe I'm the person you will hire. That's how I got a job in public health. There were no senior jobs listed at organizations like that. Ended up creating my own job through a bit of volunteer work first. So it's a rare thing to do, but it's possible.
Nice. And an aspirational thing to do. And yet that conversation, I can imagine it might last a little while. It might be a stretch goal for a few years, but if you keep that conversation going and you know what your North Star career-wise might be, yeah, I like that as a potential outcome from here as well. So we've got these ranks here. So you've got red for Facebook Marketplace, Google Health in the middle somewhere. What kind of like emotional reaction have you previously had when you filled this out? Have you ever been surprised by what's come back? And how has this helped you really get to the root of what you want and need? Because there's one thing putting numbers in, then there's the emotional feeling you might get once you start seeing the rankings.
It feels sobering, and I think that's a good thing. The one time I used it when I was at Google and I was considering two opportunities within Google. One was at a very prestigious part of Google. I would have been managing a team of about 100 designers, and I would have got asked to speak at every conference in the world about design, leading design at this important brand. And then I went and scored it against this rubric, and it scored really badly. And I was like, oh, you know what? I was getting a little intoxicated by how exciting and my ego was drawn into the possibilities of the role. And then I compared it to the other role, which was being a design partner at Google Ventures. And it was much more clear it was aligned to what I was passionate about. I'm not a passionate manager. I can manage people, but I'm not passionate about doing that. Having high status, like I have an ego like a lot of other people do, but it's not what should be driving my decisions. And so the other role at the time wasn't as well known. And I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. That's fine. And it really led me to joining Google Ventures, which in hindsight was an excellent decision. I have zero regrets about that decision. It really poured cold water on the idea of taking this other high prestige job and in a way that I think was great.
I've definitely had that reaction. Both, I remember being offered roles that I thought it was what I wanted. I actually got offered it, and then I was like, oh no, something feels off. I felt bad that I'd got that far through the interview process without checking myself and realizing, actually, you know what? This isn't what I want or need. I felt awful, really, to have got that far through a process without having that gut feel of this just isn't right. Have you ever come out of the back of something like this where you've been surprised that something that ranked really highly on your spreadsheet, actually, when it came to the process, and you were like, actually, no, this now feels off?
It hasn't happened to me, no. I know I've been very lucky. I have been quite lucky in my career. Or it's really helped me weed out things before I got that far, and that's a good thing.
Shows that the tool's been working for you, which is good. Any other elements of this that you feel like this has been helpful for you or helpful for other people? I love that it's like a forcing function to actually think deeply about this stuff. Any unexpected advantages as well?
I wish I had a quirky story for you, but no, this thing is just a basic scoring spreadsheet. What's most surprising to people is how valuable it is to stop and write down what matters to you. Everybody thinks they know, and then you ask them and they can't tell you. That's a huge red flag. If you can't write down the things that are important to you, you probably don't know what they are. As a forcing function, that's really honestly 90% of the value of this thing is to force you to write down the things in the left column and score them in the B column. So, no, I don't have any stories for you, but I have given it to quite a few people and they found it helpful.
I can totally see how, because on the surface, it looks wonderfully basic, actually, in an age where you could probably engineer something with AI that's far more complicated than this. But the beauty is the simplicity and the fact it is forcing you to think about it. I would encourage people actually to be doing this before their job hunt starts, because you get into a position where there's more pressure on you financially to find something, and you might jump at the first one or two opportunities. But actually thinking ahead with something like this, checking in with it, I might start using something like this every 6 months, just as a little personal exercise.
If you have the discipline to do that, that would be amazing. I don't want people to feel bad about not doing it, though.
Yeah.
Now, almost everybody I've talked to, the main reason they're leaving their job is that they're really stressed out. If you haven't stopped and thought about this stuff, if you're not ready to stop and think about these things, that's okay. Bookmark the spreadsheet. And when you have some time, sit down over a cup of coffee, spend a couple of days really thinking deeply about these things, and then come back and try to do a sporadic exercise. I think that's realistically, after talking to a few dozen people who've used this, I think that's honestly the more realistic approach.
Love the simplicity. Daniel, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm sure people are going to find it super helpful. We've talked today about finding out what really matters to you as a designer or someone in tech or any job role, really, the thing that you connect to most deeply and should try and be a priority in your job search. And I know you started something great to share with our audience, an organization called Hard Problems, which if someone feels like they want to do something in charity, third sector, give back to maybe a wider good, it might be something worth checking out. Tell us a bit more about Hard Problems and why you started it.
We started Hard Problems. You can read more about it at hardproblems.com. It's a nonprofit, and the goal is to help more designers to spend their full-time work on problems that really matter. I mostly mean things like public health, climate change, education, and good government. When I was at Google, I got to work at Google Ventures. And Google Ventures is Google's venture capital arm. There are lots of pros and cons to working in a venture capital firm. But the biggest pro at Google Ventures is that we did half our money in life sciences investing. And I got to work on a lot of healthcare and health startups. I worked with a company that was making a device for people with high temporary risk of sudden cardiac death. So you're wearing a defibrillator on your chest full time. Like wild. When you fall down having a heart attack in the woods, it would make a loud noise, say, step away from the patient, and boom, 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 bring you back to life. We're going to work with a company that was making a device for people with essential tremor that cancels the extra electrical signal that's coming from your brain and would steady their hands. These things are on the market now. It's wild. You got to work with more kind of boring but very impactful companies like Flatiron Health that are doing big data oncology research. So using tons of data about cancer patients to inform clinical trials. As you can see, I'm passionate about those problems. And I was thinking, even at the time, if you would walk around Google and ask people, what are the real problems of the world? People would say things like climate change. People would say things like public health, or if not public health, they'd say longevity, because everyone thinks people die too young, which is true, or lifespan, which is the new kind of fancy word in Silicon Valley, that you live a longer, healthier life. People would say education. Some people might say good government. And then you look around at your network, and almost nobody's working on those things. There are wonderful, quiet, humble people who slog away on hard problems for decades. People like Dana Chisnell, who I really respect. I think, not enough people outside government would know who Dana Chisnell is, but she's like one of my heroes. And so I was thinking, more people should go work on things that actually matter. There's a great quote from a guy named Jack Hammerbacher, and he said, the greatest minds of our generation are optimizing ads. I think that sucks. That really resonated with me. I thought so too. Don't get me wrong, I was working at Google. Google's the largest advertising company in the world. I thought about that every day I went to Google. But I think we can do better. I think there is the promise of design that can make the world better. And I think in large part we haven't proven it. I think there's large hints that design can make the world better. It certainly can make companies more profitable. But it's on us as designers to prove we can make the world better. So I thought, we should do this. But first, maybe I should go work on a hard problem. So I spent the last 8 years working on global public health, particularly on hypertension management, which is a massive scale problem around how many people have high blood pressure. In a country like India, there's 200 million people with high blood pressure. So it's a massive patient management problem. I was working with public health experts and government health officials and epidemiologists, and I was running a little tech team developing software that supported the management of large patient populations with chronic disease. I was making a software called simple.org. But now I've shifted full-time, and I'm hoping that some people in your community will join us to think about where can we apply design? Where can we find great roles? And we've done some things like we're starting to publish content, we're building a community, we've got an excellent job board of roles for all kinds of design and product roles around making the world better. And I've got to say, the one kind of silver lining that I see in the world is that there are way more opportunities to do good in the world than I thought. When we started a year ago, I was like, oh, there's not enough roles out there. There's lots of people who want to find a great role to make the world better, but there just aren't enough spots for them. Since I started this job board, or we started this job board, there are dozens of jobs every day, and we started updating them. So if you're looking for optimizing more for impact, and you maybe use your job rank scoring, and if that's high on your list, you should consider coming and looking at the hardproblems.com job board. Thanks for letting me advertise that.
Yeah, no worries. 402 jobs as of today.
Yes, just in the last month.
Yes, absolutely. I love what you're doing at Hard Problems. If someone uses the tool that we've got to today, whether it's this week, a few months, or a few years, do check that out. Reach out to Daniel as well. I know you've got a fantastic newsletter and starting your own podcast soon as well. So fantastic content for something that a lot of people think it's just not out there. Those opportunities aren't there. And if you find that you want to solve those hard problems, then do reach out to Daniel and check out what they're doing there, because it's fantastic. Daniel, thank you so much. Wonderful thinking framework. So simple. I'm very happy in my job at the moment, but I'm sure I will use again. Maybe one day in the future. I'll certainly be recommending it. And yeah, don't forget to check out hardproblems.com as well. Daniel, thanks again. All the best. And yeah, I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
Thanks for having me, Tom.